Hi and welcome back. Right, so before we get on with actually learning SQL, I just want to talk about those four databases that I provided you, and I just want to have a chat about what they are and what they are for. So this one here we're going to start with is SQL_sales. Now what that is, it's a sales database for a fictitious company that sells music equipment, like guitars essentially, and other bits and pieces. So if we were recording sales for our guitars database, what information would we need? Well, we'd need the date of the order. So we start with date, and let's put the 5th of the 4th 2020. We'd need to know what we'd sell, so we've got product, and we're going to say Fender guitar. Okay, we'd need to know who we sold it to. Customer, I put Jeff Jones. We need to know how many they bought, quantity 1, and what the price was. £299. Maybe we'd need to know who supplied that product. So supplier, let's put Fender UK. That's the distributor. What else do we need? For now, let's have the user, the person who actually handle that transaction. Okay, user. So that's going to be John, our person who works in our shop. Okay. So that's all you need to do to record sales. So let's say we get a load more sales, and they all go down here in this list. And every time we sell a Fender guitar, we go Fender guitar, Fender guitar, Fender guitar. And that means that we store the words Fender guitar every time we make a sale. But that takes up a lot of database storage space. Similarly, when Jeff Jones buys a product, every time he buys, we have to store his full name. For supply, we store it every time we sell a Fender guitar, and same for John. So what we do, instead of having Fender guitar there, we have an ID. Okay, so we'll have product, let's call that product ID, and say Fender guitar can be product ID 1. And then in another section of the database, we're going to call that products. We'll have ID and name. We can have product ID 1 is our Fender guitar. Yeah? And then product ID 2 might be, I don't know, a music stand. So when we sell a music stand, back in our orders, we just put ID 2. And so an integer, a number, it's known as an integer because it's just a whole number, takes up a lot less space than putting text. Okay, similarly, Jeff Jones can be our customer number 1. So in our, we'll have a separate table, a separate tab for customers, and we'll have ID 1, name, Jones. Okay, now let's say that Jeff Jones ordered actually online. So here we need to store his address. So all his address fields, address line 1, 2, 3, 4, postcode, maybe country, we don't want to store that every time we make a sale. So we'd store that against customers. Address 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead of having all that information in here, in our orders, we just have it against the customer. So we're just storing a number, and then we're storing the name and his address once. Okay, quantity we need to hold for every order, and price is linked to the product. So in the product you might have the price, $299, music stand $14.50. Okay, so then the orders, we don't need to store price in there at all because it's linked to the product. Supplier, well, that will be linked to the product. So in products you might have a supplier ID, and that'll be 1, and then in suppliers you'll have a ID 1, and the supplier name will be whatever I said, Fender UK, I think, didn't it? And you can have other suppliers in there like Stag or Gibson or whatever. So this orders table just ends up containing numbers, and they are the IDs. So we'll do the same with John. Different users will have different numbers. So we'll store dates and we'll store IDs, and that keeps the database nice and small. Now, we might have heard the phrase relational database. Well, that's what that means. It means that all these different bits of data are related. Okay, so in terms of our database, we might say orders, and there you go. That's what you've got. You've got a date, you've got the product IDs, customer IDs, user IDs, quantity, payment method. Yeah, don't worry about these. These are just for sort of auditing. And then you might have products, and there's your product ID, and there's your product name, and all the information that goes with product name. A product group ID, which links to product groups. Yeah. There's your product groups: accessories, acoustic guitars, bass guitars, electric guitars. You've got your customers name, and then you've got your customer addresses, and that links back to customer using the customer ID. So all those IDs in orders, the product ID links to the ID in products. Yeah, the product group ID links to the ID in product groups. Yeah, in orders you've got customer ID, which links to customers. Each customer has this ID which links to customer addresses, so customer ID is in there. So that's what we mean by relational database. Okay, so we're going to go into this in way more detail into the program. I just want to give you a brief understanding of what these databases are and what they all mean. So in your sales database, these are the tables you've got. Auth level, so that's like the user authorization level, so you've got like supervisor and admin, stuff like that. Countries, so in your address table you've got a country code: UK, ND for Netherlands, DE for Germany. So that's a countries table. It lists all the actual countries. The customer addresses we've just seen, the customers we've just seen. Yeah. Deliveries, so that's similar to orders in that when we sell products we need to purchase those from our stockist, our suppliers. So we've got a list of suppliers. Those are our suppliers: Yamaha, Fender, Gretsch, Lanakai. They're all different manufacturers or suppliers of products. And then we've got, what did I say, deliveries. So for every time you order an item in, product ID, what we've ordered in, supplier ID, where we got it from, the user ID, the person who placed the order, the delivery date, the total quantity delivered, and the usable quantity, because sometimes there might be some damaged items. So those two aren't always the same. There's one there, 24 delivered, only 23 were usable. Orders we've seen. All these other tables are reference tables. So let me show you that entity relationship model again. And now we get to see those tables represented in this entity relationship model. So there's your orders. And that links to customers via customer ID. It links to users via user ID. Customers links to customer I've not got addresses on this one. I must have updated the tables since doing this. But there's another one for customer addresses. See, in this version, I've got the customer addresses in the customers table. Pay details, that's like your card details if you pay by card. Countries, I've said. Users. Goods in, that's now deliveries. So that's product ID, supply ID, quantities. Payment method, that's cash. Debit card, credit card. So every order has a payment method. You've got your products, your product groups, your suppliers. Product price history is a bit more complicated because if a product changes its price, we need to keep a historic previous price. So we can look at any date in time for any product and say what was the price at that date. So that's your entity relationship model for the sales database. If that was a bit confusing, if that went over your head, don't worry about it, because we're going to be digging into these in great detail as we get into the program. But I wanted to show you that because it's important that you see that and you understand what these diagrams mean. That these boxes represent tables, those words there represent the columns or the fields in those tables, and these arrows represent the relationships between those tables. So customer ID, product ID, product ID. Okay, so that's your sales database. Now the thing with the sales database, it's a nice, easy, structured database. And a lot of training for SQL, you'll see a sales database because it's easy to understand. Orders have customers, have products, have prices. It's simple. Okay, so another database that I've got here for you is this HR one. So SQL_HR. Now here's the entity relationship diagram for this, and it is a very much simplified version of the actual database we've got, and also the database it was based on. So let me just explain what I mean by that. One of my previous work projects was for a human resources company, and they had this database system, this human resources system called ResourceLink, and the database behind it was very similar to this. I've basically copied the structure or a very small part of it. So this is what we've got here. In the middle of our human resources database, we've got employees. So this is what employees looks like. Okay, it's employee number, start date and end date of their employment, title, first name, surname, birth date, gender, an address ID which links to addresses. Again, don't concern yourself with these two columns at the end. There's also a person ID. That's a unique reference to that person. Any reference to that person or their data in this system will have that person ID. Okay, back to our ERM. So that employees table links onto addresses. Okay, so there's an address ID in employees and there's an address ID in addresses. Let's have a quick look at that. So it's address ID and there's the addresses. Okay, the other thing is the work patterns. I'll not mention this on this one. There's a marital status that can change: single, divorced, separated, cohabiting, whatever, married obviously. And then there's this job history. Okay, so let me explain job history. So this is a HR database for a fictitious supermarket. So every person who is employed or has ever been employed by our supermarket has a record in this employees table. And because they're working in a supermarket, they have a job. So therefore they have one record in the job history table. Let me show you that job history table. Okay, so there's job history ID, which is just for reference sake. There's date time added and date time modified. Don't worry about those. So there's a person ID which links back to person, the unique reference for that person, and there's a job ID in the start and end date. So this person ID 10,001, started employment on that date, and they're still there because they haven't got an end date. They started that job ID 1, and that links to jobs. So job ID 1 is general manager, job ID 2 is deputy manager, etc. 16 is training manager. So in your job history table, and let's just order these by person ID. Okay, and again, don't concern yourself with the SQL I'm writing here because I'm going to teach you that. I'm just showing you the databases. So person ID 1 has only ever had one job in all the time they've worked in the supermarket. General manager, wasn't it? So they started that on that date and they are still in post. Okay. This person here, 8, so person number 10,008 has had 3 positions. Okay, so they started, let's see, the earliest date is this one, 2012. So they started on job ID 12 on that date, and then on the 23rd of November that year, they finished that position. On the following day, the 24th of November, they started that one, position job ID 4. And they did job ID 4 until the 13th of March 2019. The following day, 14th of March, they started job ID 11. So if a person has only ever had one job in our supermarket, they'll have one row in that table. If a person has had multiple jobs, like this one here, they'll have multiple lines. Okay, so this is where they've started a job and finished it. They've got an end date. If there's no end date, that's their current job position. Okay, so that's job history. So job history links to employees on person ID, and then job history links to jobs on job ID. So those job IDs relate to this table here of our jobs. Okay, there's another one there called pay elements. So what pay elements is, it's how they're paid. So this joins on pay element ID, which is just a reference field. It links to job history on person ID and job ID, because for each job, he'll have its own pay. Now, if they change from shelf stacker to cashier, they might still be on £10.50 an hour, or that might change, but there's still a new line in that pay elements table. Okay, so if they've changed jobs, they'll have a new job history line. They'll also have a new pay elements line. And if they've stayed in the same job but changed their pay, they'll have an extra pay elements line. And again, there's a start date and end date. Pay type is hourly, paid or salaried. And then pay value is either the hourly rate or the annual salary. Let's have a quick look at pay elements from pay elements. So here we've got person ID 1, job ID 1. We've already seen that in job history. Started on that date, hasn't ended, because he's a manager, he's salaried, and that's his annual salary. Okay, all your managers and team leaders are salaried. All your warehouse staff, shelf stackers, cashiers, all hourly paid, and that's their hourly rate. And so we're going to be looking at calculating what is, let's say, the weekly pay they get paid, based on whether they're salaried or hourly paid later in the program. So that's your pay elements. So this person here, remember 10,008, who's had 3 different jobs. Well, they've got 3 different lines in here. And then you've got, let's have a look if we can find another duplicate. 78. Okay, change jobs, 14, job ID 14, job ID 15. I was trying to find one where they've changed just their pay. Can't just see one right now, but there's going to be some in there where the job has changed, has stayed the same, but the amount that they are paid, the hourly rate or the salary, has changed. Okay, so employee work patterns works much the same. That's your shift patterns. So joins on person ID, start and end date, and then the work pattern ID links to a work patterns table, and that's like Monday to Friday or weekends only, stuff like that. Okay, so that's your HR database. Again, don't worry too much if I'm blinding you with science here or going way over your head, but you can refer back to this, of course, but that's the structure of your HR database. It's a bit more complicated than the sales one, especially with things like this, job history and pay elements, but it's real life. This was taken from a real life system, HR system, so that's why I've put that in there. There's another database which is called SQL_training. So when I'm trying to teach you something that doesn't fit into either of those models, I will put it in the training database. So that's just full of random bits of, well, crap, really. So any just bits of pieces, tables go in there. And then finally, there's an AdventureWorks database. Now, we're not going to be, I don't think we're going to be doing any studying on this database, but it's the Microsoft standard training database. If you ever do any Microsoft training in reporting or BI or anything like that, you'll most certainly use the AdventureWorks database. And it's a fictitious online bike shop. Okay, but what's good about AdventureWorks is there are lots and lots of records of data in there. So let's have a look, fact internet sales table will be our biggest one. We run that and there are 60,000 records in there. So if we do start looking at lots of data, that's the one that we might look at. But in the meantime, that's just for you to play with. In fact, all of them are for you to just play with. Don't wait for me to teach you stuff. Feel free to go in and have a look at the data in there. I'd rather you didn't change any data, but if you do, it doesn't matter. And if you break anything, you can always just delete the database and re-upload it from those files I provided in the previous lessons. So those are your databases. We'll obviously get into those as we start looking at how to write SQL. But that's just a bit of an overview to give you a taste of what's going to come. And in the world of SQL, you need to get used to lots of different database types, different structures, different models. These diagrams, you need to understand what they mean, you'll be able to interpret those. So just an introduction to data, okay, today. So that's it for now. In the next lesson, we're into module 1, which is, well, this is kind of module 1, but module walk. So that's learning the basics of SQL. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait to get teaching you this and get watching your progress with SQL. So I'll see you in that lesson. Take care, and all you got to do is keep turning up. Bye bye.